The cold edge of dawn sliced through the thin curtains of Sarah's cramped bedroom, where emptied lipstick tubes lay scattered like fallen soldiers. A single eviction notice, its neon red stamp reading, "Final Notice," fluttered against the peeling pastel wall as her 5-year-old son, Amir, curled into a threadbare blanket at her feet. Sarah's voice trembled as she crouched beside spilled jars of her handmade blush. Sarah said, "I've poured everything into these colors. This is more than makeup. This is my lifeline." Her tears glistened on the wooden floorboards as the hum of traffic beyond the window mocked her desperation. Outside, streetlights blinked off one by one. Inside, hope's fragile glow flickered dangerously low. As the sunrise deepened into a bruised orange sky, Sarah rose from the floor and gathered her tools. Jars of pigment, slender mixing spatulas, measuring spoons she'd scavenged from thrift stores. She arranged them meticulously on a battered desk beside Amir's school uniform, folded with care. With deliberate focus she whispered, "This formula has to be perfect. There's no fallback." Her fingertips trembled as she sifted the blush powder, blending ingredients from cosmetic supply boxes hidden beneath her bed. Outside, the world carried on oblivious to her gamble. A hopeful formula crafted in secret while everyone else slept. Each swirl of the spatula felt like a silent promise to her son. Noon sunlight filtered through a cracked window as Sarah labeled her first prototype jars with imperfect handwriting. She held one to the light, inspecting the color for resilience, for warmth, for magic. "If this shade lights her world," she murmured, referencing her daughter's best friends, "promised to test the product. Then we're onto something." She snapped photos on her battered phone, careful to capture the true hue without distortion. Every notification ping made her heart leap. Maybe an order, maybe a demand for a refund. Both extremes would mean someone noticed. This quiet urgency pulsed through her veins like adrenaline. By late afternoon, the small bedroom felt like a buzzing hive. Orders trickled in through a modest Shopify page, each notification a tiny victory. Sarah's chest tightened each time an email arrived. She dared not celebrate too loudly or jinx the moment. She balanced her phone on a stack of notebooks, thumb hovering, ready to respond with grace under pressure. In these moments, her dreams collided with her fears, the risk of scaling too fast, of disappointing the few who believed in her. Yet she pressed on, determined to keep her promise. As dusk fell, Sarah tucked Amir into bed, brushing a loose curl from his forehead. "Mama's making something special for you," she said, planting a kiss on his forehead. He smiled in sleepy remembrance, unaware of the stakes she carried. Alone again, she stared at the glow of her laptop screen, sales numbers rising by single digits but climbing. Her heart thundered in her ears, equal parts exhilaration and dread. This was more than makeup or survival. It was her reclamation. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood outside a dimly lit community center with a cardboard box of her blush jars clutched to her chest. A local women's entrepreneur fair bustled within, handmade candles, vegan soaps, recycled jewelry, and Sarah, drenched in nerves, whispered, "This isn't just a product. It's a piece of me." Inside, skeptical eyes darted at her table, a second-hand cloth barely covering the surface, labels hand-drawn with care. But one woman, a mother with streaks of silver in her braid, stopped. "You made this?" she asked. Sarah nodded. "By hand, in my room." The woman smiled, swiped her finger through the powder and said, "It feels like confidence." That moment, that sentence, it lit something Sarah hadn't felt in years: legitimacy. As the crowd trickled in, Sarah's nerves melted into instinct. She spoke not like a seller, but a woman reclaiming her story. "I started in a bedroom smaller than this booth," she told a teenager trying the soft rose shade. "This shade's called Survive. Because some mornings that's all I did." Laughter and nods followed. Customers didn't just see color, they saw courage. One woman bought 3 jars, another asked if Sarah offered lessons. A local Instagram influencer passed by, pausing long enough to snap a photo and say, "You're real, I like that." Hours later, Sarah tallied her notes. Every jar of Survive was sold out. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from something rare: belief. That night, back in her bedroom, Sarah counted her earnings beneath the same flickering ceiling bulb. Double. Amir slept nearby, clutching a toy airplane. She whispered, "We did it, baby." The blush jars were gone, her fingers still dusted in pigment. She opened her laptop and saw her tagged photo from the fair. It had 1,200 likes. "This is going to change everything," she muttered. Orders flooded in within hours. Strangers wrote, "Your story moved me, and I want to wear your resilience." Her Shopify alert chimed again. Sarah blinked back tears. These weren't just sales. They were votes of faith. Her kitchen table would become a lab. Her pain, her brand. By the next morning, Sarah's phone screen lit up before sunrise. Her website was lagging under traffic. A blogger had reposted her fair photo captioned, "Beauty made in survival." Orders doubled. DMs flooded her inbox, collaboration requests, international shipping inquiries, women sharing their own stories. But her joy twisted with anxiety. She stared at her supply box. Not enough labels. Not enough jars. "I wasn't ready for this," she whispered, gripping her forehead. Yet as Amma stirred and called, "Mama," she exhaled. "No one ever is, but we figure it out." She grabbed her notebook and wrote one word in bold at the top: scale. Later that day, Sarah sat across from a supplier at a warehouse 2 cities away. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed as she laid out her pitch. "I can't meet your minimums now," she admitted, "but I will. I just need a shot." The supplier, a middle-aged woman with sharp glasses, studied her. "We usually deal in bulk, but you've got fire in your voice." "I like fire." They settled on a trial batch. Sarah left with a box half her size and twice her ambition. Back on the bus ride home, clutching the order form like a trophy, she watched the city blur past. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was strategy. 2 months in, Sarah's bedroom was no longer a bedroom. It was a battlefield of labels, boxes, pigments, and chaos. Amir's bed had been moved to the living room, and his toys were tucked beneath drying pallets. As Sarah packed another batch of orders, a sharp knock rattled the door. It was her landlord. "You're running a business in a residential unit," he said coldly. Sarah stiffened. "I'm just trying to stay afloat." But the warning came anyway. "Another complaint, and you're out." As the door shut, she stood frozen. This brand, her only chance, now threatened her roof. And yet, that night, she didn't stop working. The next morning, Sarah found Amir watching cartoons on her phone while sitting atop unopened packaging supplies. He looked up and said, "Mama, is the house broken?" Her throat tightened. "No, baby, just crowded with dreams." But she knew she couldn't keep living this way. That evening she called an old friend, Lena, who ran a small salon. "Could I use your back room as a workspace? I'll clean. I'll even do makeup tutorials for free." Silence. Then, "Bring your jars. Let's see what you've got." It wasn't a studio, but it was a start. Sometimes the lifeline isn't a loan, it's a hand that doesn't let go. Lena's back room was tiny and smelled faintly of acetone and coconut oil, but to Sarah, it was sacred ground. She cleaned every surface, lit a dollar store candle and whispered, "Let's build from here." As she restocked her supplies and arranged her tools, the salon's regulars peeked in. One teen asked, "Can you match my tone?" Sarah smiled. "I can match your power." And when she did, the girl gasped, "No one's ever matched me before." Word spread. Soon, every break between haircuts brought new faces to Sarah's door. She hadn't just found a room, she had found a following. Orders swelled again, but now, so did the cracks. A supplier botched a delivery. A customer posted an angry TikTok review about a broken jar. Sarah's stomach churned as she read, "Overhyped. Pretty story, weak product." The video had 60,000 views. She stared at her phone in horror. That one review could ruin me, she whispered. Amir, coloring nearby, said, but what about all the people who liked it? Sarah paused. He was right. She replied publicly, I hear you. I'll replace it and make it better. That reply went viral too, but this time, for her grace. Vulnerability became her marketing. Late one night, as rain pattered against the salon's tin roof, Sarah stared at her product shelf. Every shade had a name now: Resist, Rise, Rooted. Her brand wasn't just makeup. It was a survival language. She updated her tagline, color that knows struggle. Her eyes welled as she whispered, we don't just wear it, we lived it. That post, just a photo of the shades with that line, exploded online. Celebrities reposted it. One influencer DM'd her, we need to talk wholesale. Sarah looked at her trembling hands and said aloud, I'm not surviving anymore. I'm building. That night, she didn't sleep. She scaled. Weeks later, Sarah opened her email and froze. The subject line read, Investor interest, urgent. She clicked it. A beauty incubator in New York had seen her post. They wanted a call, today. Heart pounding, she borrowed Lena's laptop and sat trembling in the back room, trying to hide her son behind a curtain. The video call connected. A boardroom. Polished suits. Sarah, in her apron and eyeliner, said, I don't have a degree, but I know how women want to feel. One man leaned forward. We don't invest in stories, we invest in movement, and I think you've started one. The screen froze for a second, but Sarah had already felt it shift. The next day, she met Lena in the alley behind the salon. They want me to pitch in person, Sarah whispered, stunned. Lena didn't hesitate. Go. But what about Amir? Tickets? Clothes? We'll figure it out. That night, Sarah sold her old sewing machine, borrowed a carry-on, and found a neighbor willing to babysit. She booked the cheapest flight to New York. As she packed samples in tissue paper, she looked at her son. We're flying into something big, baby. Amir replied, bring me a picture of the clouds. She smiled. I'll bring you a new life. New York was noise, steel, and sky. Sarah stood outside the skyscraper, holding a cheap binder of notes and jars wrapped in scarves. Inside the elevator, she practiced her lines. But when the boardroom doors opened, panic surged. Then she saw the mirror by the coffee machine. Her eyeliner. Her product. She breathed deeply. Let's do this. She pitched like a mother with no safety net, like a woman who's clawed her way from eviction to elevator. At the end, one executive said, you're not pitching a product, you're pitching purpose. And just like that, her silence turned into applause. The incubator offered her a small fund and 6-month mentorship. As she returned home, Sarah found her son holding a crayon drawing, her flying among clouds labeled Mama Sky. She knelt down and cried into his shoulder. We're in the sky now, baby. The salon threw her a celebration, streamers, cupcakes, happy tears. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to feel proud. Not just for what she'd built, but for what she refused to abandon, herself. That night, as music played and friends toasted in the salon, Sarah stepped into the back room alone. She lit the same dollar store candle she had months ago and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Her fingers brushed over old labels, dried pigment stains, and the echo of the girl who once crouched on a bedroom floor. She pulled out a fresh jar, wrote a new name, Skyline. And in that moment, the brand became more than survival. It became legacy. 6 months later, the first batch of professionally manufactured Skyline blush hit warehouse shelves. Sarah stood on a factory floor in a borrowed blazer, overseeing rows of identical jars gliding on a conveyor. "From bedroom to barcodes," she whispered. Her investor, watching from the mezzanine, said, "You're not small anymore. This is scale." But Sarah knew something deeper. This wasn't just a milestone. It was a mirror. Every jar held the weight of sleepless nights, eviction threats, and bedtime promises. She ran her fingers along the passing jars and smiled. Every one of you, she murmured, started with a broken brush and a prayer. A week later, Sarah was invited to speak at a major beauty summit. The panel was full of CEOs in silk suits. She stood there in recycled heels and nerves. "I'm not from legacy," she began. "I'm from leftovers." A hush fell over the room. "But I know that beauty isn't born in boardrooms. It's built in bedrooms, behind closed doors, by women told no 1,000 times." Applause erupted. A buyer from a major retailer leaned in. "Let's talk shelf space." Her eyes widened. "Shelf space? Nationwide," he said. She didn't cry, not yet. But that night she would. Alone. Grateful. No. Fierce. That night in her hotel room, Sarah stared at her reflection. The skyline glittered outside the window, New York pulsing beneath her. But the mirror reflected something else, a tired, triumphant woman with chipped nails and fire in her chest. She whispered, "You're doing it. You're really doing it." Then her phone lit up. A text from her ex-PT. "Saw your pitch. Impressive. Maybe I was wrong." She didn't flinch. She typed back one word, yes. Not to him, but to herself. Yes to rising. Yes to dreaming. Yes to never letting anyone measure her worth again. At the official launch of her product in stores, Sarah stood in the aisle of a major retailer. Rows of her blush shades lined the shelf, next to giants who once ignored her emails. Amir tugged at her hand and whispered, "Mama, you're famous." She knelt down, held his face and said, "I'm something better. I'm free." Cameras clicked. An employee asked her to sign a display. It was surreal, but not fantasy. This was earned. This was lived. As she posed for photos, Sarah remembered every broken morning that led here. This wasn't a product launch. It was resurrection. That evening, back in her old neighborhood, Sarah hosted a pop-up for local girls. She gave away samples, offered tutorials, and told stories, not of fame, but of grit. "You don't need a studio, you need a reason." One teen whispered, "You make me believe I can do anything." Sarah handed her a blush labeled, "Fuel." "Because you already can." Music played. Laughter filled the street. The same street where she'd once feared eviction now echoed with celebration. She didn't just reclaim her future. She handed out pieces of it. Shade by shade. Scar by scar. Dream by dream. Months passed. Skyline was now stocked in 47 cities. But Sarah hadn't changed her morning ritual: coffee, blush, purpose. Her team, 4 women from her community, worked out of a rented co-op space. Laughter and resilience filled the air. One asked, "What's next?" Sarah replied, "More stories, more women, more seats at the table." She wasn't chasing viral moments anymore. She was building foundation, literal and metaphorical. A platform, not a pedestal. A space for others to rise. "If it started in my bedroom," she said, "it can grow into their empires." Added depth. That same morning she sketched out her next move, a mentorship circle. From mirror to market, she called it. A free program for women with dreams and no safety net. She hung a chalkboard on the wall. On it she wrote, "Teach them what the world want." The room nodded. An award came in the mail, Breakthrough Founder of the Year. Sarah placed it beside Amir's drawing. When he saw it, he beamed. "That's yours, Mama." She smiled. "Ours." But she didn't share the award online. Instead, she posted a photo of her first failed jar, captioned, "Where it began." The comments flooded in. "This is why I trust you. Never stop." She realized then, people didn't just follow her brand. They followed her truth. Her mess, her rise, her radical honesty. And in a world of filters, that kind of raw, it was gold. Added depth. Later that day, she whispered to the shelf of rejects, "You were never failures. You were drafts. Amir looked up and asked, like when I don't color inside the lines. She laughed. Exactly. But sometimes, those are the best parts. One evening, Sarah held a private event for single mothers. No media, no hashtags, just shared stories over tea and mascara. One woman cried while applying a lipstick called Break. Another laughed as she layered glow. Sarah said, "We don't cover flaws, we crown them." That night, they weren't customers. They were a choir of survival. No stage, just sisterhood. For the first time, Sarah didn't feel like she was leading them. She felt like she belonged with them. And that feeling, that connection, that was richer than profit, added depth. At the end of the night, she passed out handwritten letters with each product sample. One read, "Your story deserves shelves." Another, "I see you." They didn't just wear makeup that night. They wore recognition. Back home, Sarah opened an old box labeled Rejects. Inside were the failed formulas, faded labels, and cracked jars. She held one up, smiled, and said, "Thank you for what you taught me." Then she placed it inside a glass display box labeled Origins. Failure wasn't something she feared anymore. It was something she respected. The badge of every builder, every fighter. She turned off the light, but not before placing a sticky note on her mirror. It read, "Next, mentorship." Because her rise wasn't the end. It was just the blueprint. Added depth. That week, 8 women joined her first cohort. One was a retired janitor. Another, a refugee baker. Sarah stood at the whiteboard and said, "You're not here to impress. You're here to impact. Let's mix something that matters." One morning, during a school visit, a girl stood and asked, "What's the hardest part of building your dream?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Believing I was allowed to." The room went quiet. Then applause. She looked out at the young faces, girls who'd one day launch their own dreams. You don't need permission. You need faith and fire. And as she walked out, her heels clicking like battle drums down the hallway, she knew her mission had shifted. Not just to build, but to blaze a path. And leave it open. Added depth. Before she left, she pinned a card to the school bulletin board. It read, "For the girl mixing ideas in silence, your voice builds empires." She signed it, "A single mom, once like you." Years later, Sarah walked into a national cosmetics expo, not as a visitor but as the keynote. Banners bearing her brand waved above the entrance, towering alongside those of international giants. Her team flanked her, young, diverse, ambitious. Some had once been her mentees. Now, they were directors and partners. A display booth showcased not just blushes, but skincare, foundation, eye palettes, all products tied to stories. Each product in our line is named after a fight we won. Read the backdrop. A young intern asked, "Nervous?" Sarah smiled. "No. I've already been through worse than bright lights." As she took the stage, cameras clicked and murmurs spread. She stood tall, adjusted the mic, and began. "Once upon a time, I mixed pigment in a bedroom smaller than this stage. I had no savings, no backing, just purpose." She looked up at the audience, press founders, dreamers. "And I'm here to tell you, purpose wins." Applause rose like thunder. Backstage after the speech, Sarah sat quietly in the green room. Not alone, just still. A moment between chapters. She held an old compact in her hands, the very first product she ever made. It had no barcode, just a hand-drawn label smudged from time and tears. Her fingers traced its edges like a sacred object. Then Sarah, a stagehand, peeked in. "They're ready for your walk-through." She smiled. "They can wait a second." She turned to the mirror, applied the blush from the old jar. Not for looks, but as ritual. She saw 2 versions of herself in the glass, the girl who once crouched on the bedroom floor, and the woman now building floors for others to stand on. She whispered, Thank you for not quitting. Not to herself, but to the memory of who she used to be. Weeks later, Sarah returned to where it all began. Her old block. Same cracked pavement. Same graffiti-tagged poles. But today it looked different. Because today, it belonged to them. Her pop-up event wasn't just a giveaway. It was an awakening. Free products, scholarships, mentorship signups, and a storytelling booth where women could record their own origin tales. One woman held a blush and whispered, "This saved me." Sarah smiled. "No, it reminded you of what you already were." Across the street, a mural artist painted a portrait. Sarah, crowned in color, holding a brush like a torch. The mural read, "You are the maker." The ground that once trembled beneath her fear now pulsed with music, laughter, and defiant beauty. The street hadn't changed. But she had. And now, she was changing the street in return. That night, Sarah sat at the kitchen table beside Amir, now a teenager with eyes that held her fire. "Do you miss the early days?" he asked, sketching quietly. She glanced at the drawing. A woman atop a mountain made of blush jars, holding a flag that read, "Skyline." "I miss the fire," she replied softly. "But I carry it now, everywhere." Amir grinned. "You think I could build something too?" Sarah placed a hand on his. "You already are." They pressed paint-covered hands onto the wall beside the table. 2 prints. One red, one gold. Underneath, she wrote, "Legacy is not what you leave behind. It's what you build beside them." This wasn't just a family moment. It was inheritance in motion. In one final interview, a reporter asked, "What do you want your legacy to be?" Sarah didn't rush her answer. She let it breathe. Then she replied, "I don't want a statue, I want sparks. I want women to see what I did, and realize they can too. Not because I'm rare, but because I'm real." She paused. "I want the girl lying on a cold bedroom floor, whispering to the dark, to know the light hears her. I want her to know she's not forgotten. She's just early." The interview aired nationwide. Millions watched. And in homes across the world, girls scribbled formulas, drafted dream names, or stared into mirrors and smiled differently. Because Sarah didn't build a brand. She built belief. And so her name lived, on shelves, in stories, in scars, and in every woman who ever mixed fire with fear and called it beauty.